Pignolo is a native grape variety of Friuli Venezia Giulia in the northeastern corner of Italy. You know, between Venice and Slovenia. Pignolo is hardly a mainstream variety, with a whopping 30 producers planting it to date. Until a couple of years ago, it was only 14 that were known. Why would I want to speak about such a small varieties where in the world there are so many other grapes? Well, for me Pignolo is a grape that has a deep connection with my upbringing. I still remember my grandpa talking about Pignolo at family lunches on Sunday, him being a proud Friulan. But when I read the book from Ben Little, my guest today, it seemed for him how Pignolo is a variety that defied the logics of the wine scene in Friuli, as you will hear him talk about in the interview. Ben Little has recently released a whopping 492 pages long ode to Pignolo called Pignolo, Cultivating the Invisible. I hope you enjoy the show. And if you're enjoying it, remember to hit the subscribe button. Hi, I'm Mattia Scarpazza, and this is the Looking Into Wine podcast. Wine and winemaking can be complex, but this podcast has a simple mission. We want to give you the skills and tools to harness your passion about wine. Through this series, we will shine a spotlight on some of the different regions, process, and concept that shape the
Welcome to the Looking Into Wine
wine
podcast. I'm Mattia
Scarpazza,
your host.
And today, we're talking about an invisible
variety grown in Friuli Venezia Giulia, in the northern east of Italy, called Pignolo. In a sense, all the red of Friuli Venezia Giulia can be considered invisible to most consumers. And the more I read the book that I'm about to present, the more I understood the struggles of the producers and what they're going through. I welcome to the show Ben Little, author of the book Pignolo, Cultivating the Invisible. Welcome to the show, Ben.
Grazie, Mattia. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's my pleasure. I got very excited when I heard that someone was going to publish the book on Pignolo. It's the region where my grandparents are from, and it's a region I'm always excited to speak about and help promoting the world of wines of Friuli. So yeah, I mean, wow, what a task you had writing a book on Pignolo, 400 pages. And how long did it take, and what pushed you to undertake this mission?
Well, yeah, and it was a mission, and it still is a mission. We're now at 6 years, but to bring the book to fruition was 5 years. But in the beginning, actually, I had no intention to write a book. I was simply working away on a little idea that had developed called the native grapes, which transformed into a blog. And because friends had told me I was just tasting and writing so much, and they found it curious, they said, really, I should do something about it. So I did. And so the nativegrapes.com was born in 2015. And a few months into that, I don't know, I just felt writing as I was, I should do something special for my adopted region, Friuli Venezia Giulia. I should maybe pick one of their native grapes. And basically the adventure began, as the book recounts. And when lots of people ask me, why Pignolo? It took me about 2 years to figure out that in fact, I didn't choose Pignolo. Pignolo chose me. And that was an amazing...
And for the listeners, I mean, you're originally from Ireland? I mean, from the...
Yeah, I'm a Dubliner, DOCG, born and bred. But much like the story of Pignolo, people also ask me, what brought you to Friuli? And well, the simple answer is love. And it plays there's a very strong undertow of love in the book, in the whole story about Pignolo. And the reason for that, in essence, is on the face of it, there is no commercial reason to produce Pignolo because of its distinctive invisibility. There's no call for it in the market, and this was one of the things actually that I found intriguing about it, that it has this kind of mythical quality. When people mention the name Pignolo, all of a sudden it's kind of like, oh, what? Who? Where?
Yeah.
and then yet nothing materializes. It just seems to vanish into the ether. And it was that kind of mystique that drew me to Pignolo more than to Refosco or Schioppettino. I mean, in terms of native grapes, I think Friuli is second only to Piemonte for the population of native varieties. So, to be honest, I could have picked anything.
Yes, let's picture a bit of the painting here. Where are we in Italy? What is Pignolo? What are we talking about for the listener hasn't heard of Pignolo and my dedicated listeners?
Well, this is actually part of another beautiful question because we're in the northeast of Italy. And one of the things that I started to hear regularly as I began my crusade was that doing all my research in the English language and using my pidgin Italian to open the local doors, they would recount to me how when the producers would go to fairs abroad, people would ask them, where are you from? They'd say, we're from Friuli Venezia Giulia. And they would go, where? And they would say, well, do you know Venezia? And people say, oh, yeah, I know Venezia. Yeah, well, it's just, further east.
Yeah.
Close to Slovenia. Oh, yeah, I know Slovenia. So, but between Venice and Slovenia, there is a land that is effectively invisible. Or it seems to be. And so that's, part of where the title of the book, Pignolo, Cultivating the Invisible, because in effect, that's what I felt I was doing. And I felt that these custodians of this monumental grape needed some assistance. But I didn't exactly know how. And as I said at the beginning, I really didn't have an intention of writing. There was no intention of writing a book or doing any of that. It was simply to do a few tastings if I could. I had gotten 15 names from Google, and I thought, well, that's great, and that I'll do some tastings. So I went around, I started to gather samples, and I asked the producers as I was going, well, how many of you are there? And the number that was trotted out regularly was, well, there's 20, 25 of us. Certainly no more. So I felt safe and secure that this little project of one, which would be a tasting, which would be maybe a couple of articles I'd post on my blog, and a little bit of stuff like that. But it was when I got to 33 producers that I realized I had more than doubled what Google could see, and I'd also gone beyond the expectations of the producers themselves. So there were producers that they didn't even know about. Now, this isn't Friuli Venezia Giulia, northeast Italy, on the frontier with Slovenia. It's not a very large region, and it produces what they say in numeral terms, produces about 2% of the production of wine in Italy. Okay, so if you think of 100 bottles of wine on the Italian table, 2 of them will be from Friuli. So that's a kind of a measure of where we are. But it struck me that when I went beyond their knowledge and their understanding, I realized there's something really weird going on. I tapped into something that I had no idea about, that no one had any idea about.
I mean, when we put something in perspective, like 15 producers is probably, you managed to write a whole book about 33 producers now that but like it's less than of the producer you probably find in a commune in Barolo. And that is how big we're talking about. But Pignolo, for me, when I came to the realization of the struggle they had, it was a bit different angle. I've been reading about the review of the book and the stories, how people get together to know Pignolo. For me, it was a bit different because my grandfather is from the region and we would have some Pignolo. So it was something that had memories in me, so it wasn't so invisible. But now then I had some more perspective into it. It really feels so small and so tiny what is happening. I mean, I do know some of these custodian, how you call them, of the Pignolo people. But who are they? Why they decided to keep doing the Pignolo? What drove them to do that?
That has got to be the one question to which it's very difficult to get an answer, even directly from the producers themselves, because in some cases they will tell you how many times they thought about grubbing it up, and that just and then the 2012 vintage came along, and now taste that. That's why I stuck with it. So they have this. It's almost. What would it? I mean, it is a deep-seated. It's an intrinsic love. It's something. It's genetic, I feel. But in a way, the book became like an anthropological study, because the only way I could really begin to start understanding their relationship was to understand the culture and the history behind what has brought them to this point. And so many people will say, there of all the regions in Italy that you will come to, that when you come to Friuli, you walk into a coffee shop or something like that, everyone will turn around and look at you. They won't say anything, and you'll get this look, and you kind of go, and it's like they're wondering who you are, and they're quite at the beginning kind of a reserved people, but when you understand the history, even just the last 2,000 years of history. They literally have been the pathway for every possible invasion that's ever taken place in Central Europe, and because it was the lowest lying land that provided that gateway, that access point. Otherwise, you have to immediately deal with the Alps, and crossing the Alps, for many was obviously, and still is, an impossibility. So Friuli was this gateway, and with every single emperor and dominion riding roughshod through the region, they left their mark. So, but the people, it's an agricultural community, agribusiness, that is their business. There's no real industry. There are some industrial activities, but in essence, it really is farming intense, and of that, viticulture is obviously plays a huge role.
Yeah, I mean, for me, which part of you found that the Pignolo is grown? Because for me, when we was doing the research, we were talking about. I was mentioning at the beginning, like how almost the red wine production of Friuli is invisible by his own token, because it's only like 8%, 10% of the production, something like that.
Well, at the moment it's actually about 18% of the total production.
But But people, what they think about Friuli is always the first thing that come to mind is the whites, and even producers and what the people are pushed to think about Friuli wine are the whites, and which. Also, most of them are international varieties. Also, for the red, Merlot is the number one red grape. Yeah. Refosco is the number one red native grape, but quite a way behind Merlot. Yeah. Or I should say Merlot, to distinguish myself as an adopted Friulano. Yeah, exactly.
Because for any of your listeners who are coming to Friuli Venezia Giulia in the not too distant future. If when you order a red wine, if you ask us for a red wine, you're more than likely going to receive a Merlot. So you have to pronounce the T at the end. If you say Merlot, they will know you have never been there before.
Yeah.
But you're right, the international varieties. And in the whites, if you think about it, I mean, the big white grape is Pinot Grigio and Glera. In fact, between Pinot Grigio and Glera, which is used for making Prosecco, constitutes almost over 50% of the total vineyard plantings. It's quite incredible how even in the last let's say 12 years things have changed dramatically.
Yeah, I mean, for me it's interesting because I'm trying to picture this painting what's happening in Friuli, and for me also when I think about Pignolo, it really is the top red wine for some of the producers, what they are proud about. And for me, I was thinking about the grape is you mentioned something about slow wine and slow food. For me, Pignolo is more cases the ultimate example of a slow wine.
Yeah,
you mentioned
it absolutely is.
You mentioned about the raro and your categories. Why how can it come about with this like very long aging? What is your take there?
I mean, it's, what would you call it? It's empirical teaching. I mean, there is no guide. There has been no guide. And I wouldn't even say that my book is a guide. It's kind of an intro to a guide, 432 pages of an intro. It could actually have been an 800-page book, but we'll leave that for maybe a second volume.
Second edition.
But yeah, but this experience, it's like Pignolo grows on you as a winemaker, as a viticulturist. It grows on you. It grows with you. You grow with it. And I part of the reasoning that when I reached this sense of Pignolo having chosen me was almost like it became animal transplant thinking. It like Pignolo dragged me into its realm, into the plant kingdom, in order to understand, to help me understand. So you have this battle with knowledge and understanding. And so most of the producers with their early vintages, they would have been producing their first Pignolos with the experience they had in producing Merlot or Cabernet Sauvignon. And that will just not help you. So it's no wonder how in the early years they encountered difficulties, because from the point of view of the grape, of Pignolo the grape, it is so phenolically rich. There is nothing that comes close to it for tannins in the vineyard here. I think in all of Italy, probably the only other variety coming close to it would be Sagrantino. So they had no experience. They had this wonderful ancient history, and people would talk about the Pignolo with such reverence. It's like it really is kind of like a holy grape, the holy grail of holy grapes. But there was no practical experience, and there's lots of reasons why it found itself, let's say, abandoned, and at one point actually being technically illegal to grow. But those who planted it, when I think of in the early 70s, Girolamo Dorigo was one of the let's say the first movers, but and he planted his first vineyard near Butria in 73. And then, 5 years later, Walter Filipputi found himself in a position where the Abbazia di Rosazzo, needed some work to restore vineyards there. And, he asked about Pignolo, and Monsignor Nadaluti said, "Oh yeah, there it is there." And he said, "Where?" And he said, "Yeah, those two vines there." What? Yeah, there were only at that stage there were only two vines. But when you go back through the history and you come across all the references which talk about Rosazzo, Pignolo di Rosazzo, and how the hills were teeming with it, and then you find that in fact Pignolo was quite diffuse, even in the lower lying lands. There is this modern discussion that yes, it should only be grown in the hills, and that may be correct to a point. But there are producers on lower lying ground in the Isonzo who are producing Pignolos with incredible precision and depth and age-worthiness. That I don't subscribe to. I don't subscribe to it being planted in just one place only. Yeah.
I mean,
I think it's a much more versatile grape.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, when I think of Pignolo, I can think of like it's almost like a call for Friuli, for a Nebbiolo almost. He has the nuances, he has the complexity, he has the ageability, which a lot of other grape in the area may not have. And I mean, also, as you were saying, I was thinking about the how the approach of winemaking must have changed. I can see now later release you can not easily, but when you find a Pignolo, most probably it's going to have a bit of age onto it, which it makes it even more
attractive. Or
Yeah,
there's quite a bit of production there.
yeah. I mean,
Interesting.
I would say because I mean the amazing thing is okay. The project really gathered legs when I reached 33, but when I reached 66 producers, then obviously like everything completely changed. So now a consumer has the possibility to seek out 66 different Pignolos. And in the first year that I started my research, which was in 2016, that was probably the first year in modern history that almost all of the producers produced a Pignolo in vintage 2016. So in terms of Pignolo's modern existence, how we see it today and how we can now begin to chart its future. 2016 is anno zero. It's year zero for Pignolo, for me. Because at some point over the next year or two, I will organize a tasting in which we will taste side by side almost all of those 2016s, which will give us the possibility to cross-reference the different areas, the different comune in which the wine is being produced. So whether we're talking about the warm area around Butrio, whether we're talking about this kind of its classical home of Rosazzo, whether we're talking about Corno, whether we're talking about Spessa di Cividale, whether we're talking about north of Cividale, moving further north in the Colli Orientali, or whether we're down in the Isonzo, where everything from mesoclimate to microclimate to the geology, everything changes. So we will have some wonderful reference points which will allow us actually begin to understand. For me, the big thing with Pignolo, and as I reach the point of having to decide this is a book, I have to write this book, it was realizing that more than anything, we have to understand it. You won't know Pignolo. You'll never get to know Pignolo if you don't understand it first.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a. I mean, I think one of the kudos I have to give you is about the book, how you present it as well. You made it an unknown grape variety. You created the whole book about it. But also the way you presented with the infographic, the images, and the pictures. It really brought it to life. It created something really interesting. I mean, I enjoy it, and
Thank you.
I must say that it was one of the most prettiest and most well presented book I've seen. And I saw quite a lot of books behind me. I got quite a few wine books, but that was definitely one of the most striking. But it needed to be that way to captivate the story. For me.
Perhaps, but it's, as I say, it's almost like I had no choice in that. This Pignolo brought this creative instinct out of me, and so in a sense the book became about Pignolo, about me, but also about you, the reader, because we are all involved in this story, this kind of love triangle, and or at least that's what, I guess that's what the book was attempting to do, this triangulation, to plot where we are and to possibly consider where we might be at some point. And I think we do have to have a little bit of vision. And I think this was in some ways the use of imagination. The producers, 65 of them, and yet they're not absolutely sure what they have in their hands, and this part of the wonder of this wine is what I believe it can become. It's not there yet, but there are so many wonderful examples that tell me absolutely that if they find the rhythm, nature's rhythm, Pignolo's rhythm, and their own rhythm, then we will get there. And one of the great examples of this is what I call in the book, and you mentioned earlier, my classification of the Pignolo Raro. And this is the most incredible thing that, okay, in this region, which is famous for its white wines, that there are these producers producing a red wine, a grape that's absolutely known by nobody, and they are cellaring it for a minimum of 10 years. And you ask yourself, what? How is... And so I found that within this group of 60-odd Pignolo producers, that there were already 6 who were raising their Pignolo in the wine cellar for a minimum of 10 years before releasing it to the market. And I thought, in the short period of time, how did they get there? Because I can guarantee you that they were not talking with each other. So in Italy, the only other producer that stands out to my mind is Emilio Pepe with his Montepulciano d'Abruzzo. And he has this cycle, this 10-year cycle before releasing his Montepulciano. But in Friuli, there are 6 producers. So, Bressan, Joszko Gravner, Radicon, Levinia di Zammo, Conte d'Atmis, and Adriano Gigante. And they arrived at this point naturally. They were brought there. Their Pignolo brought them there. Now, in the meantime, last year, just in early November, 2 more producers joined their ranks. So the Raro is now available from 8 producers. And by the end of, by November of this year, there will be 2 more, including Silvio Yerman, who's Pignatrus. It will be the third release of his single cru Pignolo, only the third. And he planted it, his first plantings were in 1999, and this will be his third release.
I mean, when you mention the names, I know that they are, I know they are small producers themselves, but some of them have the big names in the wine community, especially throughout the world. There are some very incredible producers there, and having these...
This is the amazing thing.
Havoc 18, these grape varieties, definitely it creates the interest, especially now that they achieving incredible success abroad with their white wine, most of them, which is definitely driven. Where do you see... I know this we're talking about 10 years down the line, but where do you see Pignolo could grow elsewhere? What are the areas do you think is suitable for Pignolo? Because I know Australians and new Americans, some of them like to find this native varieties.
Yeah,
where do you?
It's very funny.
Let's finish on with a bit of speculation here.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I in the research, obviously I checked. So, basically Pignolo is growing only in Friuli Venezia Giulia. I discovered that there is now a producer in Brazil, in the region of Santa Catarina, who planted in 2011, following a visit to Joszko Gravner. And he released his first vintage, the 2017, which in the Brazil Wine Awards in 2019 won the gold medal. The best red wine in Brazil was a Pignolo. Now, this is part of the beauty of these things. So I was in touch with the University of California, Davis, and I checked around a number of other universities, and so I spoke with producers, the likes of Randall Graham, ex-Bonnie Doon. He would love to plant it in California. The thing is obviously getting the material, and that's not so easy to come by. In fact, it's not even easy to come by in Friuli, because even right now, a number of the producers are telling me they're going looking for baby vines because they want to plant more, and there's nothing available at the moment. Anyway, there's no rush. There'll have to be a few muscle selections for sure. But the thing is there is no rush. But I see for example, in Brazil, it's planted at 1,300 meters above sea level. It's in let's say, in a volcanic or dormant volcanic region, and which means it's obviously enjoying being on volcanic soils, and it doesn't mind the altitude. So it was funny because I was saying to a couple of people here, what if we planted some Pignolo up in Forni di Sopra or Sappada, which is about 1,300 meters here in Friuli, and see how it grows. But I honestly, I believe Pignolo is very versatile, and if you give it time and respect, honestly, it will deliver in time. It has. It's a vigorous growing vine. It's not shy, but where the issues, let's say, in the last sort of 50 years, would have been about the yield, and they would say that most growers would have said, "Oh, the yield is very low." Well, I actually haven't noticed it being very low. I would call it medium yielding, but with maturity. So if you go into vineyards that have anything from 20 to 30 years of age, what you see is a really constant yield. That the vineyard itself has found its equilibrium, and that is a really big thing. It was one of the things that Girolamo Dorigo said to me in the very beginning. He said, "Ben, I didn't have any intention of making a great wine to start with. I just wanted to try to understand the grape, having read this history about it." And but what he said to me was when the vineyard hit 15 years of age, it was like the vines just hit a switch, and they started to, So he microvinified all the way through, but he noticed that that's the other funny thing. When I found all of these producers, I discovered that most of them had planted in 2000, 2001. Plus 15 is 2016, anno zero. And so what it means is that from the 2016 vintage, and you can actually taste it from pretty much all of the producers. If you take a vertical or whatever they have from years previous to 2016, you can actually taste the maturity, that the growth. It's it almost feels human, and so I think that when we get to 10 years from now, I think the quality is going to be exceptional. I think it's not Nebbiolo because the grapes are entirely different. Pignolo has got a relatively good color potential. The tannins are great. The acidity is good. It's got all the markers to make an exceptional age-worthy red. And the evidence we have in the glass is that it can do that. So if you have producers like Gravner and Bressan who are cellaring for 14 years, Gravner is now at 14 years. His current Pignolo is the Rosso Breg 2007. Radicon is at 12 years. But they have now reached this natural point of release. There's no pressure on them. And that's the wonderful thing. Some of the producers feel pressured to release. So they're releasing their Pignolo at 4 or 5 years. And then people are going, "Oh, I tasted that Pignolo and it's just, but hold on to it for another few." I think there is the white wine mentality, obviously, the vintage, and get this movement, this liquidity, cash flow. Pignolo just doesn't fit that model. But
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. I was thinking.
It sucks in, but it's
a killer.
The potential it has to deliver way beyond expectation in a matter of time. So patience, as I wrote in the book, patience is key, and it's something that we as a, let's say, a first world society, we don't have a lot of patience. We've lost most of our evolutionary traits. That which is called human nature isn't human nature. It's not nature at all. We make choices. And the amazing thing about Pignolo is that, these 60 odd producers chose love instead of money. And I really do believe anyone who chooses love over money will be rewarded. I think in the future, Pignolo has got all of that to offer.
I mean, Ben, I think this is the perfect sentence to conclude our conversation, because it's such a. I can see the passion. I can see the drive. Then fine. I think now Pignolo's found and Friuli is the red of Friuli. They found an advocate that finally bring things together. And
I was going to say, the quality of red wine in Friuli is exceptional. There are already a handful of producers who are bucking the trend and moving beyond 50-50, as in white and red. They're now approaching 60-40, 60%, producing 60% reds and 40% whites. This is an awful lot of this is also going to be connected to what we're seeing year in, year out for the last 10 years at least, the effects of climate change, and the effects are very evident. One would actually say that Friuli as a climate is more adapted to red wine making than white wine making at this very point in time. And they have the raw materials right there. They don't have to go looking for anything else. With Refosco, with Schioppettino, with Tazzellenghe, with Pignolo, with Fumat, Cordenossa, Cianoria, the list goes on and on. The amazing thing actually is just on a native grapes point of information. Friuli has been blessed by nature with more red varieties, more black grapes, than white varieties. Amazing how man chose to focus on white instead of what nature was suggesting. And man chose white because that was the way they could quickly make money. I understand. As I say, I'm an economist. And as I said in the book, an economist in recovery. But they're the simple reasons. The suggestion that Pignolo was, a vine on the verge of extinction. Dare I say, it was never close to that point. It didn't. When man says that they saved, this grape variety, I prefer to look at it the other way and think that the reason Pignolo exists is to save us. And so for me, it's been fantastic to get the opportunity to speak on Pignolo's behalf, to be its voice, and I'd like to thank you for all the time you've given me. We could spend another 2 hours, by the way, people.
That's. I know, but then I think it would be getting into different parts, and we might not be talking anymore about Pignolo. Anyway, Ben, thank you again for your time. It's been so interesting to speak with you. And just before I let you go, where people can get your book,
a small,
and how can people find you?
Independent book writer, self-published book like Pignolo Cultivating the Invisible is just, it's not plausible to be made available through Amazon. So there is one and one only online point of sale, and that is themorningclaret.com. Simon Wolf's wonderful shiny shop, and that is where you can pick up a copy. And so all over the UK, but also all over the planet. Pignolo is winging its way around the world as we speak. it has already touched every continent. So in time, it wouldn't surprise me if there are plantings in New Zealand and Australia and North America and the like. Time will tell.
Yeah. You never
Pignolo's amazing that way.
Exactly, you never know. Hey, Ben, thank you so much. And again, yes, okay. So once again, the book is the author Ben Little here, the author of Pignolo Cultivating the Invisible. Thank you.
You listen to the Looking Into Wine podcast with Ben Little, author of the book Pignolo Cultivating the Invisible. Remember to hit the subscribe button and to tell your friends about the podcast. You can find Looking Into Wines on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music and every major listening app. If you enjoy the podcast, you can donate on mattescarpazza.com. Music produced by Samuele Di Nardo, editing and mastering by Tommaso Ascoli.